Ladies and gentlemen, we made it. It is here. We made it to football season. Auburn versus Baylor. Let's get into the preview. Let's see what's going to happen on Friday night. All right, a couple things first. Housekeeping, okay? I don't want to spend too much time on this, but, I've watched a lot of different, preview videos from, national people or just people that aren't a fan or somebody who covers, one of these two teams, Auburn and Baylor. The Auburn narratives, the two things that people are liking to bring up that they think are relevant are not relevant. It's the three play callers and it's the three quarterbacks. So quickly, Auburn will not play three quarterbacks necessarily. Now, there's a caveat where, if let's say three different players took a snap at some point in the game, a direct snap from the center, would that be that crazy? Not really, right? There's wildcat opportunities, stuff like that. Ashton Daniels, maybe he has a wildcat type package, goal line, red zone, that kind of thing. Who knows, short yardage. The Deuce thing, do we have a package where he goes in where, Jeremy Johnson used to randomly and just run one play, a play action that Nick Marshall seemingly could have ran? Would we disrupt the flow, Jackson Arnold, that kind of thing to do that? I don't see that happening. I think this is a non-issue. I think it's something that got said, brought up, and I don't think it's going to happen. The other one is the three play callers. Okay, so we've got Ken Austin, Derek Nix, Hugh Freeze, three play callers. If you're an Auburn person, you probably at least are somewhat aware of the contractual situation with Derek Nix when they kind of poached him from Ole Miss. If you don't know about that, feel free to look it up. But that's definitely got something to do with it. The other side of this, guys, is it has more to do with weekly preparation and game planning. Okay, it doesn't have necessarily to do with three different people calling plays on, one person calling it on first down, the other person calling it second down, the other person calling third down. It's just not really how it happens. And any coaching staff, it is a collaborative effort to some extent in terms of play calling. All right, and Hugh Freeze, the head coach for any college football team, ultimately is going to have the final say-so of what the play call is. That's how it's going to happen for Auburn. That's how it's going to happen Friday night and the rest of the year. All right, with that out of the way, there's a couple things I want to get to. So we're going to look at 5 X factors. So these are players for each team that I think, in order of importance, that I think are going to, show up Friday night. And then we're going to look at matchups. So think, Auburn's offensive line versus Baylor's defensive line, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get right to it. All right, 5 X factors for Baylor. All right, let's start it off. And again, this is in order, in my opinion. Number 1 is number 1. All right, and this may surprise people. Michael Trigg, I think, is Baylor's number 1 X factor. This is for their offense and defense, okay? This guy is a problem. He had some games last year. He only had 30 catches, I think maybe around 400 yards, something like that. He had some games, of course we get to add here, he had some games where he took over, and he was essentially the reason they won. I think this Houston game is one of those examples. You see these plays back-to-back, okay, and there's a few more that we'll get to. But stuff like this, Baylor loves the perimeter screen game. They love to spread you out. DJ Durkin already said this week, somebody caught it at practice. I think maybe it was Cole Pinkston from On3, where they were working on a drill. DJ Durkin said something along the lines of, if you see a screen, you better trigger. Well, then they have the answers off of that, right? Show block, okay, shed the guy, get open, find space. That he can hurt you, he can hurt you over the middle of the field down the seam. Very gifted athlete, transfer from Ole Miss. The one-on-one situation in the red zone here, big body, just throw it up to him, and I'll show you a couple more plays as well. All right, here's another one. You see, again, kind of that orbit motion, the play action, get the linebacker sucked up, and then hit it right over the top. Michael Trigg, again, going down the seam. Again, we'll talk about some other players, but if Baylor gets the run game going a little bit, especially when they're running tempo and then they pop a play action, it's really tough on that second level, the linebackers and secondary there, to be able to cover this guy while they're also worried about the run fits. Here's the last one for Trigg. All right, again, just kind of pushing a verticals concept. Look at that catch. All right. Obviously, he's got the ability after the catch to hurt you as well. I've seen enough. I watched as much Baylor as I could from last year. I've seen enough from him where he took over games in certain moments where, again, it's a matchup problem. You've got safeties and linebackers having to cover this dude. He can block in the run game a little bit as well. So he's my number 1 X factor. I think if he has, 5 or more receptions, that could be a key indicator to me that Baylor's offense was able to hurt Auburn quite a bit. So Michael Trigg's number 1. All right, number 2 is safety. All right, number 3, I believe these guys kept all their same numbers. Devin Bobby. All right, so here's a nice red zone pick here on 1st and goal. So that's hurtful for Houston. But, his coverage skills seem to be fine. But I'll show you a play in a second that really kind of epitomizes who I think this guy is. All right, so here's a good example, first off, or some scheme stuff. Baylor does a ton of this. This is, when people talk about simulator pressures, stuff like that, a lot of times I think, in my opinion, it can be just boiled down to say, like, we are bringing a blitz per se, like, so somebody from the second level or from, basically not the front, but we're only still rushing 4 in total. And so you see a lot of stunt, you see a lot of movements from the line, and a lot of guys coming from different angles here on like second level pressures. But this is Devin Bobby coming up from the second or third level there. Good read recognition there. He's got the back and the flat. Triggers on it. He's a really good tackler. He's a real physical player. Devin Bobby for me is a guy that, the more he shows up, the better it is for Baylor. He's number 2 for me. All right, now number 3, Keaton Thomas, number 11. All right, so I think he's listed as their MAC. They changed their depth chart positions a little bit there. There's a lot going on here, okay? So we'll play this a little bit and then we rewind. This is another example of, maybe what you would call a simulator pressure. Now, Baylor is bringing 5, right? And then they're basically just playing man-to-man behind it, or at least it turns into man-to-man. I mean, it looks like man-to-man to me, but it definitely turns into man once they all push vertical here. All right, but Keaton Thomas, number 11, good player on the second level, Baylor's defense linebacker. If you watch him enough, he's not necessarily built like a traditional Mike backer, for whatever you think that's important nowadays. To me, he's more like DeMarcus Riddick, all right, and less like, KJ Britt, somebody like that if you're an Auburn guy. But he's a good pass rusher. He's a great athlete. He's a good tackler. I mean, he's just pretty solid all the way around. And then, again, this is a little bit more schematic stuff. You can see all the movement. Like, at the end of the day, and this is something we'll talk about with scheme, at the end of the day, how good do your actual players need to be if you get, one guy completely free and another guy coming on kind of a stunt there as well? They don't have to be superstars, right? So the scheme's going to come up, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But Keaton Thomas, number 3 impact player for the Baylor Bears. All right, so number 4 impact player, X Factor. All right, for the Baylor Bears, Sawyer Robinson. And look, I'm picking on him a little bit, quarterback. I'm going to show you a couple of bad plays he had here, okay? This is a bad play, all right? He's throwing a hitch. They're running like a trap-looking type deal to me, where, that corner's got eyes inside. He's got, they're playing vision defense, maybe, if you want to call that. I think that's kind of trendy at this point. So we have this one, and I'll show you another one. All right, here comes another one later in the game. All right, so we'll take a look. Still first quarter. All right, this guy, I believe, ended up transferring maybe even to Florida State, if I have that right. But, man, Crawford, Lee, Durkin calls it like vision coverage, where he's putting his corners, he's putting secondary guys in situation where their eyes are on the quarterback. Sawyer Robertson can be jumped. He can be taken advantage of a little bit. Now, look, I'm showing this because I think as a whole, all right, people really respect Sawyer Robertson as a quarterback. He had a great year last year. We get all that. They had their 6-game winning streak. If you dive a little deeper, and I won't necessarily pull it up, but if you dive a little deeper, though, I mean, at the end of the day, okay, Big 12 is not the best defenses, and a lot of the defenses where he had his highest quarterback rating were some of the worst defenses in the Big 12, okay, like Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Texas Tech, teams like this where he had some of his better games were against some of the worst defenses. So I'm just saying, I don't think he's like the best quarterback ever. All right, if you give him plenty of time and they've got good enough weapons on the outside, Sawyer Robertson can hurt you. He's an older guy. Last year, he wasn't even the starter going into the season last year. Kind of worked his way into that first few games after they came out of the bye week. Had a really good performance against Texas Tech, and they were off and running after that. All right, he's a good player. He can hurt you with his legs, but I don't think he's like at all some type of like first-round draft pick conversation type guy. I think Auburn will play a lot of quarterbacks, okay, that are better than him this year. That's why he's a little bit further down the list. He's number 4 for me. I kind of expect him to do what he does. I would expect a stat line somewhere in the 250 yards, one or two touchdowns, 1 or 2 picks. And I think, which way those kind of go, I think is going to probably be one of the major deciding factors in the game. But plenty of stuff you can go watch on Sawyer Robertson. But for me, number 4 on the X Factor list for Baylor. All right, number 5 on my X Factors list, starting running back Bryson Washington, really, really good football player, okay? One of their better players on their entire team. He's got great size, 6 foot, 216. He's got, enough speed here. You can see that. Good vision. He's hard to tackle. He's hard to bring down. Again, a big guy that can run hard, run fast, okay? I like him a lot. At the end of the day, I don't think we're in a time where a running back is going to take over a game, for a team. I also do think at the end of the day, Auburn's run defense, I think we'll be able to corral him, pretty well. But he's a really good running back. Absolutely can have big plays, can bust a game open, can put away a game at the end if they're up, right? So Bryson Washington, really good football player, number 5 on the X Factor list for Baylor. All right, 5 X Factors on the Auburn side. We're starting with maybe the obvious one. It's going to be Keldrick Falk. He's Auburn's best player. He's by all accounts, a top 10 draft pick next year's draft. Huge guy, 6'6", 285, whatever he is. Obviously, you can see him killing the quarterback here on back-to-back highlights. He's really good against the run. Okay. He's everywhere, man. They can line him up on the edge. He can dominate interior guys. He can dominate, tackles, obviously tight ends, pulling guards, anything. They slant him and have him collapse gaps. He's strong enough to do that. He's really good against the run. He chases plays down. He finishes. He has, a ton of sack ability, tackles for losses, disruptions. So he's a freak. At the end of the day, I think it's really going to be up to him and maybe a couple other guys on the front to dominate this game for Auburn. All right, number 2 X Factor for Auburn, arguably, easily could be number 1. It's going to be the quarterback. It's going to be Jackson Arnold, okay? And you see here, a couple of plays here, Jackson Arnold hurting the defense with his legs, okay, with his running ability, and he can do it. You can see there he's got a super compact, quick release. He's pretty accurate when everything's going pretty well. Decent decision maker. He has a tendency to freak out at times, okay? So, just kind of is what it is. But if we can have, some consistency like this, maybe get him on the move, make it a little bit Bo Nixie, all right, as much as that used to be kind of annoying at times, the kind of the franticness. I think Jackson can play more under control than some of those times, like the Bo Nix era, but I think it's some of that. At the end of the day, Hugh's kind of been saying this during fall camp. If you go convert a first down on your legs, or with your legs, even if you missed an open receiver potentially, nobody's going to get on you for that. So make good decisions. When the throws are there on the RPO, take it. When there's lighter boxes, give it or pull it and run it yourself. I'm sure we're going to have some design quarterback runs, some follows, and some sweeps and some things like that. So, yeah. Again, easily could be number 1 most important player, for both teams could be Jackson Arnold, the quarterback for Auburn. It's going to be in his hands in a lot of ways, but number 2, all right, on my X Factor list for Auburn. All right, number 3 for Auburn, X Factors, kind of surprised me, honestly. I'm going Champ Anthony here, so I believe he's going to be the starter at the free safety position. You can see him here, maybe getting away with a little tug, who knows, but, good play on the pass defense. I got a couple more to show you. All right, now if you're an Auburn guy, you know what this play is. It's awesome, and then it's also terrible because it's the play before Champ Anthony got hurt for the season last year. But here he is coming up, kind of playing that vision coverage, that cover 3. He's playing corner here. Again, he's playing free safety this year. But Champ was playing really good football, all right, this time last season, this time of the year last season. And having him back, he's voted as a team captain, one of the top 4 vote getters from the team there. So he's a team captain for the season. He's a physical guy. Again, that matchup between him and other safeties and linebackers for Michael Trigg and some of those guys, I think is going to be vital. His play recognition and all that kind of stuff. So I think he's going to be a really good player. He's a great leader for Auburn, and I think everybody's excited to see him out there, healthy and playing ball. But I think for what his role is going to be, I think he's going to be really, really important. So for this game, he's number 3. All right, again, maybe another little bit of a surprise, but number 4 on the X Factor list for me, for Auburn, is going to be Jeremiah Wright. So here he is, big right guard, number 77. All right, getting down here, seeking somebody out. This was a 3rd and 9 conversion here, a kind of a shrewd play call, I think, from Hugh Freeze. Knowing that Oklahoma's probably going to drop out a little bit, 3rd and 9, and they were able to convert. Here's another one. All right, so another example. It is the same play. All right, so we're just going to block down here this mint tight front, kind of the four eyes here. So we're just going to collapse this down. He's going to pull, all right, and he's going to kill Billy Bowman, good player, for, again, a 12-yard run here on 1st and 10. So now Auburn's kind of getting things moving. But the reason he is an X factor for me is he's got to be doing that. He's got to set the tone. He is somewhat of a vocal leader up there. You can kind of see when he gets his juices going here. He's a difference maker in the run game. But the other reason he's an X factor, when we look at scheming a little bit, Baylor loves to bring the simulated pressures, but they love to bring heat actually in the middle of the offensive line. Now, that could be personnel related. Maybe they try to heat up the edge and change their angles and stuff like that, but they love to pressure the middle three of the offensive line, and in pass pro, that's sometimes where Jeremiah Wright has been susceptible. So he's an X factor because he has got to dominate, set the tone in the run game, and he's got to hold up in pass pro when they're switching people around and crossing faces and stunting and twisting and doing all that kind of stuff. So number 4, Jeremiah Wright. All right, number 5 on my X factor list. Let me blow this up here. Number 5 on my X factor list. Let's set the table here a little bit. So if you're a Baylor fan or just an interested party here checking this out, Auburn's 2-4 on the season. Okay, they're up 17-6 on the road at Missouri, almost the fourth quarter here. Okay, it's 1st and goal, and we'll kind of play this forward. All right, we run an RPO, perfect pass right through his hands, right? So that's going to make it 24-6. It's going to be really hard for Missouri at that point to come back. But let me zoom ahead of here, and you'll see where I'm going with this. All right, fast forward. A couple of bad plays after the drop. It is 4th and goal, okay? Auburn to go up by 14 here, which would be huge, okay? Go up 20-6, 14. That way it would take more than just, 2 touchdowns to beat you. This is a close field goal. I don't know the distance, but a 30-yard attempt from the left hash, and we can't convert, all right? And this right here is a microcosm of, it's not just the missed kick. It's the drop touchdown pass and then the sack that Peyton Thorne took, and then the missed kick that, again, is kind of a microcosm of how Auburn managed to go, 5-7 last season. Number 5 for me on the X factor list for Auburn is going to be the kicker position. Alex McPherson is battling some type of gastrointestinal deal. They've got this kid back who was a true freshman last year, and they have another transfer from Southern Miss. And that's a lot of kickers, to try to figure out, okay, who is going to go kick this important kick in the second half or whatever have you. We've got to have a kicker that makes field goals. So number 5 for me is the kicker position. I don't know who's going to be the primary kicker. They've got to figure that out, and it's going to be really important. So number 5 for me is kicker. All right, so quickly, let's talk. All right, here we go. Let's talk matchups. Okay. I'm going to kind of roll through this quickly, but the way I see it is it's not a worthwhile exercise to talk about who has the better quarterback necessarily, or let's say who has the better receiver group, because at the end of the day, the receiver group from Baylor is going to be competing against the defensive backfield from Auburn, right? Vice versa, so on and so forth. So, matchups, all right? Let's talk about Auburn's offense versus Baylor's defense. Let's go offensive line, defensive line. Who do I think wins there on that matchup? I'm actually taking Auburn's offensive line here. I've got the depth charts pulled up. You can kind of quickly scan through heights and weights and stuff like that. That doesn't tell you everything. Jackie Marshall, really good football player, okay, but I don't think he's necessarily a guy that is a superstar by any means. He's a really good football player, a guy you have to be aware of, and I don't really see a ton of personnel on their front that are, let's say Keldrick Falk level of disruptors that you really have to be prepared for. I think they're good. I think they're good schematically, but I think with the additions of Xavier Chaplin, who again I think is going to be a first-round pick at left tackle, I'm not ashamed to say that, and then Mason Murphy to shore up the offensive line, obviously with Jeremiah Wright, Connor Lew, and Dylan Wade, and Tutal, I'll take Auburn's offensive line there in the matchup versus Baylor's defensive front. All right, next on the offensive side of the ball for Auburn, we'll go running backs versus Baylor's linebackers. I'm actually taking Baylor's linebackers here. All right, I really like Keaton Thomas. Travion Barnes is a good player who transferred in. They have, Kylan Reed, Phoenix Jackson, another transfer. If you count Matthew Fobbs-White as more of a pass rusher type linebacker in that group as well. But Keaton Thomas is really good. I like Damari Alston. I like Jeremiah Cobb. I like Darrell Robertson. But there's a little bit of a prove it factor there. I think with Keaton Thomas being who he is as more of a proven commodity, I'm going to lean Baylor for now. All right, and the last matchup on Auburn, just talking offensively, you've got the quarterbacks, the receivers, let's just say, the pass catchers versus the defensive backs for Baylor. Here, I'm going to take Auburn. Some of Baylor's defensive backs I like. Again, we talked about my guy, where is he? My guy, Devin Bobby. I like Devin Bobby quite a bit. We can scroll down a little bit here. There he is. They got some transfers, in there as well. But with Cam Coleman, with hopefully a healthy Eric Singleton, Malcolm Simmons, Horatio Fields, Perry Thompson, all these guys. And I'm still believing in Jackson Arnold until he shows me that he can't get it done. I think he's really talented. I'm taking Auburn's quarterbacks and receivers versus Baylor's defensive backs. Now, for the scheme, obviously you could spend a lot longer talking about scheme, but I'm going to give this a push, and the reason is kind of like I just showed you, Auburn moved the ball up and down the field pretty much against every opponent they played last year. It was turnovers of all sorts, fumbles, drop passes that turned into picks, bad picks where we threw it right to the guy. It was missed field goals. There was some bad play calls. There was some bad time management, but I think Auburn's scheme is better than I think a lot of Auburn fans are giving it credit for at this time just because the results haven't been there at the end of the day. But they move the ball, typically. Now, the reason this is a push is because I think, Dave Aranda's scheme is very multiple. There's a lot going on. It's a lot to prepare for. They even changed a lot this offseason. You can see, you kind of mentioned it earlier, all these positions are new. He spent a lot of time, by all accounts, this offseason kind of reshaping the structure of the defense and the scheme. So I'm going to give this a push because I still like what Auburn has shown. There just hasn't been a lot of consistency. And I really respect Dave Aranda's scheme and kind of being able to kind of attack from a lot of different angles. So I'm going to give it a push. All right, so O-line, D-line, Auburn, running backs, linebackers, Baylor, quarterback, receivers, DBs, Auburn, and then let's push on scheme. So if you look offensively for Auburn, the matchup versus Baylor, I'm in favor of Auburn on that one. I think that's a good place for Auburn to be there offensively. Let's look at the defense for Auburn. All right, we're going to go Auburn defensive line versus Baylor offensive line. I had it as a push because Baylor's offensive line, I did a chat GPT and kind of asked ChatGPT to tell me, who are some preseason guys getting preseason love from different, publications, different, awards lists and stuff like that. And they have a couple of guys on their offensive line that are coming back. I believe their center, I believe the right guard here, and even Fugar gets a little bit of love there too. So some of these guys, a lot of these guys are coming back. They have a lot of experience, and some of these guys are, getting some recognition. Ultimately, though, I did end up going with Auburn on the defensive front. You've got Keldrick Falk. I don't see Baylor's offensive lineman necessarily being able to hold up consistently against him. And, man, I like some of the guys that Auburn has. I mean, Bobby Travis, I think, is going to be a handful to deal with. I think, guys like Malik, goodness gracious, Malik Blockton. Obviously, you've got Amaris Williams. You've got Malik Autry and some of these guys, Jordan Crawford, that I think are going to show up and play well. Of course, you've got Kieron Crawford on the edge as well. I like that group. I'm kind of going out on a limb a little bit because they still need to prove it. But I like, ultimately, Auburn's defensive front versus Baylor's offensive line. All right, now Auburn's linebackers, versus Baylor's running backs. I'm going Baylor's running backs. Now, of course, Baylor lost their primary backup running back, I believe, for the year. But Bryson Washington is just really good. And at the end of the day, I'm sure they have some other guys that are decent. And you just have to say, man, like right now, Auburn's linebackers are unproven. You love what DeMarcus Riddick did as a freshman last year, as a true freshman. Woodyard's been in the system for a while. Xavier Atkins is a really fast player. We like what Melendez has done so far as a true freshman as well, but they're unproven, so you just got to give this one to Baylor as far as running backs versus linebackers. All right, now, Auburn's defensive backfield versus Baylor's quarterbacks, receivers, and in this case, Michael Trigg from the tight end position as well, so pass catchers. Look, the quarterback there, all right, Sawyer Robertson, good player. Again, he's not like, I don't think he's some, awesome, crazy, first-round pick or anything like that. I think he's really good as a college football quarterback. I like some of these guys. So Cole Wilson's a guy, if you watch Baylor last year, they had a couple of shorter guys. Ashton Hawkins is coming back. They had another shorter guy last year that was explosive. So they'll have some short guys running around making plays. Josh Cameron, I like a lot. 224 redshirt senior, I believe a former walk-on. Huge guy, tough after the catch, really physical kind of possession receiver, almost Anquan Boldenish, maybe something like that. But really good player. And then, of course, Michael Trigg, frightens me. So I have a lot of respect for the quarterback and the passing game for Baylor, but the reason this is a push for me is because that's how highly I think of Auburn's secondary. Champ Anthony coming back, free safety. Caleb Harris coming back from his true freshman campaign where he had tons of true freshman All-American honors. Kayan Lee, Rayshawn Pleasant, Jay Crawford, if he keeps this up, this kind of the trajectory he's on, he could be first, second round draft pick at the corner spot there. So a lot of guys in the secondary for Auburn. They're really, really good football players. I'm going to give this a push, and I feel like that's kind of fair. All right, now look, this is a little bit repetitive, but the scheme here, I'm giving it a push. Okay, blanking on the offensive coordinator's name for Baylor. I think this is the second year there. Good guy, been around the block. Kind of an air raid, but implementing some of the run game stuff. Tempo, you're going to see, obviously. They're going to spread it out. They're going to hit the perimeter screens. They're going to have the variations off the perimeter screens that we saw earlier and try to attack you down the field. But DJ Durkin is a guy that, he's one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in the country for a reason. Ohio State tried to get him, and now they have the former New England Patriots defensive coordinator and Lions head coach as their defensive coordinator. So this is kind of the tier of defensive coordinators across the country that I think DJ Durkin is respected as. He has a really good scheme. He's going to have these guys ready to play. They are going to be flying around. So I'm going to give the scheme a push because I do like what Baylor does offensively, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to pick them over what DJ Durkin does defensively. All right, so there you've got Auburn on the defensive line, Baylor on the linebacker running back, and then a push on the quarterback, receiver, defensive backs, and the scheme there. So really, I'm looking at that kind of going, pretty good matchup there. You look at Baylor's offense versus Auburn's defense. It's a tough matchup for both parties. I think that's going to be a big, swinging point for the game on Friday. All right, kind of the last factor here we'll touch on is talent. Now, the 247 composite, Baylor's pretty far down the list in terms of what Auburn's going to face in the SEC. I believe they're in the 30s. Auburn's top 15 or so, something like that. So obviously that's not end all be all. But look, Auburn has more talent. There's no question Auburn has more talent than Baylor. They're deeper. They have better players. So on the talent factor alone, on paper, Auburn has more talent. There's no question about it. All right, so looking at all that, hopefully, you get a little bit of what to watch for. Guys from Baylor, guys from Auburn that I think are going to be really impactful in this game. Auburn fans have dealt with a lot of pain over the last few years, all right? And I think a lot of people are really hesitant or scared to want to trust or believe that, this year can be different for Auburn. But I think the way that I'm seeing this and the way that I'm looking at this, Hugh Freeze could get a little bit antsy and Jackson Arnold could get a little bit antsy and they could turn us over. And the crowd, even though it's only 55,000 or so, could be, excitable and that kind of stuff. And, I can see where this can get a little hairy. I mean, it could remind you a little bit of the Cal situation a couple of years ago. So I can see it. I can see it going a lot of different ways. Ultimately, I think, and maybe I'm going to be hurt, but I think that this is finally the time where all the pieces are going to come together, not in some, glorious 2019 LSU fashion, but they're going to come together enough where you've got so many good receivers, you've got a good running back room. Jackson Arnold's a talented guy that can kill you with his legs, and he's accurate as a passer. The offensive line is Xavier Chaplin, I think, is going to be an absolute star. I think the scheme is good enough on offense. I think Auburn ultimately will move the ball consistently enough, not hurt themselves too much in turnovers and things like that, and the defense will hold up enough and kind of just limit the damage that Baylor is going to do. I think there's going to be touchdown scores, I think, for both teams. Now, I do think if you watch any football week 0, offenses are just behind, okay? We talked about that with fall camp, blah, blah, blah. Offenses typically are a little bit behind, okay? Defenses this early in the year, so there will be some sloppiness. There will probably be some turnovers. That is to be expected. But I think by the end of the game, Auburn's talent ultimately, and I think they're going to win in the trenches up front on both sides of the ball. And I think ultimately that's going to be where the game comes down to. Maybe Jackson Arnold getting some late first downs with his legs, punching one in at the end. My guess here is going to be something along the lines of 31-20, something like that type of finish, 31-21, something like that, maybe 31-24. But I think Auburn's going to have finally the ability to have the lead, make stops on defense, convert enough, make field goals potentially, and put this game away and come out of Waco with a win, which would be huge, coming out 1-0. So I know it's a little bit of a longer video. I hope you enjoy the content. I'm obviously really excited about the game. One more thing before you go. All right, guys, Rowback, remember Barn 20, get 20% off your order. They got the game day collection. They have a ton of stuff, tees, shorts, Q-zips, pants, hoodies, polos, etc. Go in here, put Barn 20 in, get 20% off your order. As always, guys, thank you for watching. We'll see what happens this Friday night, but I'll be back for a post-game review as well, breaking everything down that I'm really excited about. So keep it locked on thebarnauburn.com and here for T-Dub's Film Room. I'll see you guys next time.